It is my privilege to introduce the speaker and the moderator and our friend, Professor Gil Troy, who will lead this next and final and probably the most exciting panel today. Professor Troy is a professor of American history at McGill University. He lives mostly in Jerusalem and somehow teaches there as well. He's also a fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute, and he writes often about contemporary issues of Zionism and many other things as well. And he's a great New Yerushalmi, and it's a pleasure having you, and you will introduce your fellow panelists.
Thank you, Ilan. Erev Tov L'Kulchem, the Schaefer family. I'm amazed that you came here at 3 and you've stayed, and you've invested, and you've cared, and you've talked, and you've brought kavod, you've brought respect to the Z word, to Zionism. And your contribution today is particularly important to me, because to tell you the truth, I sometimes get weary. I get tired of these Zionism wars. This morning, I spent my time with an essay that won the Martin Luther King Day contest, essay contest, from Carnegie Mellon University. And what was the heroic model that these organizers of the Martin Luther King Day competition wanted to honor? It was the model of a young 17-year-old boy who freed himself from the yoke of being pro-Israel, who writes about how, as a pro-Israel Jew, and I quote because I couldn't make this up, I was grouped with the racial supremacists. I was part of a group that killed while praising its own intelligence and reason. And in this essay, this young student goes on to mention the G word, genocide, in his depiction of how Israel approaches the Palestinians. And then stretching, we as graders recognize the stretch, says he's one day on a bus with his friends after a fresh round of killings. It seems to be during the Gaza conflict, but he doesn't even give the context. I asked 2 of my friends who actively supported Israel what they thought. We need to defend our race, they told me. It's our right. Now, I've been involved in literally thousands of conversations over the years with young Jews, older Jews about Israel. They might say, I'm defending our people. In his essay, he could have put in something that would have been racist against the Palestinians. I would have winced, but believed it. He could have put in something about a Holocaust guilt trip. But I've never met a Jew, let alone a 17-year-old Jew in Pittsburgh, who talks about defending our race. But he wanted to win the Martin Luther King essay contest, and he did. Because this kind of thing passes for bravery in certain circles in the United States today. Coming here, embracing the Z word, is far more brave, as you'll discover, those of you who are returning to college campuses. And bringing a passion and the idealism that we've heard about to Zionism is far more countercultural than this young man's contemptible essay. I'm struck by Avi's vision of fighting for Israel and fighting for peace, and it not being a contradiction. I'm struck by Yoav's language that we have to reclaim Zionism and look at it and look at the word as a vital body part, a vital organ. At the start of this extraordinary symposium, we heard a conversation that emphasized a lot about aspirations for Israel. How do we use Zionism to make Israel better? I want us, as we finish, to turn the conversation a little more inward and ask, what does it mean to be a Zionist abroad? What does Zionism mean to us when we're not just building Israel, but also trying to build our own Jewish communities elsewhere and ourselves? This fight against the delegitimizers is important, but it can't be the only story. If we don't defend ourselves, who are we? But if we only defend ourselves and we don't take some time to dream and to make ourselves better, what are we? And as part of that conversation, I want to bring out two concepts from the old Zionist treasure chest. One, and I need to blow it off a little bit, it's got dust. The question of the Jewish problem. The Jewish problem. This is what motivated Theodor Herzl. This is what motivated so many of the Zionists in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. The Jewish problem. We knew, as Natan Sharansky said, what the Jewish problem was for Theodor Herzl. Anti-Semitism. What's the Jewish problem today? What's our Jewish problem? I think if we had a more vigorous, more thoughtful, more sustained conversation, on the kind of level of conversation that was going on in the breakout sessions, about what's our Jewish problem in our communities outside of Israel and here in Israel too, we could start pushing a conversation toward how can Zionism be a solution. Zionism meaning Jewish nationalism. Zionism meaning the understanding that we're a people, not just a religion. How can that help us? And the second concept that I'd like to dust off, gotta be consistent, is the new Jew. Right? In response to the question of the Jewish problem, there was a whole conversation about the new Jew who would come to this land, and we heard from Josh, our activist friend, about Anubanu Arza Livnotu Lihibanot Ba, to build and to be rebuilt. We know that there was a whole conversation, it was a somewhat flawed conversation to our mind, about what it meant to be a new Jew back in the 1900s. They, to my mind, threw out a little bit too much of the tradition. There were elements that need retinkering. But I think if we took these two ideas of the Jewish problem and then the new Jew as a response to the Jewish problem, we could start getting some meat on the bone and getting to the question not just of what Zionism means for the state of Israel, but what Zionism means for each and every one of us. We need to take it personally. We need to feel it. We need to see how lucky we are to have this thing called the Jewish state, to have this conversation about this Jewish movement called Zionism, to have this understanding of Zionism, of Judaism, as having its national component, and see where we go with it. So in a sense, what I'm saying is, with apologies to John F. Kennedy, ask not what you can do for your country. Ask what your country can do for you. Ask what Israel, the state of Israel, the Zionist movement can do for us. And to help us ask that question and answer it, we have two extraordinary guides today. Two television stars. Micha Goodman is just starting a television show on Channel 2 at 2 p.m. on Fridays on Parshat HaShavua. He's the author also of an Israeli bestseller on Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed, which is being translated into English and should be coming out in the next couple of months. He's the director of the Ein Prat Academy for Leadership, a nonprofit, an extraordinary place that brings religious and secular, I don't even like that word, religious and less religious Israelis together to talk, to learn after the army. Not everyone has to end up in India, gaping at their, doing navel gazing. They can come to Micha's Academy and learn and deal with Jewish texts and great philosophical texts. He has a doctorate from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, lectures in Jewish thought there, and serves as a senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. Next to him is Miri Eisen, who also should be familiar to those of you who watch television, for getting up again and again and defending Israel. And defending Israel during some of the very difficult moments in Israel's past, as Israel's government spokesman during the Second Lebanon War, working in the Israel Prime Minister's office as his international advisor, and achieving the rank of full colonel in 2004 and being one of the few Israeli women colonels, which is also sort of a nice tikkun to all the conversation about the new sexism we're seeing in Israel. And so these two extraordinary thinkers and leaders are going to give a quick vision of their understanding of what Zionism means to us, how we can take it personally, and then we'll open it up for dialogue between them and with you. Thank you very much.